I woke to the sound of a monitor beeping softly, the sterile sting of antiseptic thick in the air. My eyes searched the room, blurry with medication, for one face, my son's. Instead, a nurse placed a vase on the windowsill. "Your son had these delivered," she said gently. "Peonies, my favorite, but no hug, no voice, no Derek." As she turned away, I reached beneath my gown and touched the chain around my neck, the key to a safety deposit box he didn't know existed. If I meant so little, he'll mean even less. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I was never the type to ask for much. My name is Margaret Lynn Holloway, widowed at 42, mother by 24, and loyal past reason. For most of my life, I believed love was proven through sacrifice. And for Derek, my only child, I would have offered the very bones in my body if it meant he'd never feel the kind of pain I once did. After my husband passed, pancreatic cancer, swift and cruel, I poured every ounce of myself into raising Derek. We didn't have much, but I learned how to stretch $1 like a magician, sewing buttons back on school shirts, clipping coupons with surgical precision, and putting aside $10 each week into a little white envelope labeled Derek's Future. He was a quiet, sensitive boy. Big brown eyes that noticed everything, even the way I paused at checkout counters to recalculate totals in my head. I used to find his scribbled drawings tucked under my pillow, crayon hearts with "I love you, Mom" written inside. I still have one of those in my nightstand drawer, folded like a prayer. I never remarried. People asked, but I always said the same thing. I already had the best. And truthfully, my hands were full. Raising a child alone isn't just tiring, it's lonely. But Derek filled the silences. Piano lessons, spelling bees, late-night homework meltdowns. Those were my chapters. He gave me purpose. We built a rhythm, just the two of us. I worked at the county clerk's office for nearly 30 years, typing birth certificates by day, and warming up leftovers by night. Our kitchen table was where life happened. Geometry lessons, birthday candles, heart-to-hearts over grilled cheese. I remember the day he got into college, first in our family. I cried right there on the porch, holding the acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket. He held me and said, "Mama, I'm gonna make you proud." And he did. He became a lawyer, moved to the city, married a woman named Kelsey, who always smiled like her mouth didn't mean it. But that was later. Back then, I still believed I mattered. I believed I was more than just a stepping stone he'd eventually leave behind. I still believed that children never forget who fed them before they could feed themselves. I thought I had raised a son who would never let me feel forgotten. But I hadn't raised a son. I'd raised a stranger wearing his face. The first time I felt it, truly felt it, was Thanksgiving, 3 years ago. Derek called 2 days before to say they wouldn't make it. "Kelsey's mother isn't feeling well," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. I could tell it wasn't a decision. It was an announcement. I had already thawed the turkey. I set the table anyway. For hours, I moved around the house like someone acting out a memory, lighting candles, fluffing throw pillows, folding cloth napkins Derek never cared about. I told myself next year will be different, but it wasn't. Phone calls came less frequently. After that, once a week became once a month. When I answered, his voice was always rushed, his tone warm but vacant, like he was mentally checking boxes. "How's your blood pressure, Mom? You eating okay? Great. Gotta run to court." And Kelsey, well, she never quite knew how to look me in the eye, always dressed in soft cashmere and soft disdain. She'd say things like, "Margaret, have you considered assisted living? They have great social activities for someone your age." My age. I smiled through it all, nodded like I agreed. I told myself they meant well, that maybe this was what modern love looked like, efficient, clinical. But then the questions started, subtle at first. Do you still own the house outright? Are all your accounts in your name, or joint with? Anyone? Do you have a will drafted already, or would you like me to refer you to someone I trust? I'd known that tone, heard it across my desk 1,000 times when people came in with birth records and hidden motives. It's the tone of someone trying to sound helpful while weighing you like a fruit at the market. At first, I brushed it off. I wanted to believe Derek was just being thorough. After all, he was a lawyer, and I was getting older. Maybe this was just what responsible sons did. But there was something in the way he said assets instead of savings, estate, instead of home, the language of detachment. I didn't tell him I still had the deed to the house in a private box, untouched since I paid it off 18 years ago. I didn't tell him about the savings I'd quietly grown from my modest salary, or the tiny inheritance my mother left me that I never spent. Over time, his visits turned to scheduled check-ins, no longer driven by love but logistics. He started arriving with a leather binder. He brought documents. He asked for signatures. The last time he visited before the hospital, he stood in my kitchen flipping through pages and said, "You know, Mom, a trust would help avoid probate. It's really in everyone's best interest." Everyone. I looked at him over my teacup and asked, "Is that what I am now, Derek? An everyone?" He blinked, forced a laugh, and said I was being dramatic. But I wasn't. I was beginning to see the shape of things. When did I become a project instead of a person? I don't think it happened all at once. It crept in like mold, subtle and suffocating. He stopped seeing me as the woman who sat up all night with him during his chickenpox. Now I was just a portfolio he hadn't quite optimized. So when the chest pains came, sharp and sudden, I dialed the only number that had once meant safety. And when it went to voicemail, I heard more than silence. I heard the answer I'd been avoiding. I don't cry easily. That's something grief teaches you how to store emotion neatly, like winter clothes in a chest. But on the 5th night, as the hallway lights dimmed and the nurses' voices softened into whispers, the tears came. Not loudly, not with sobs. Just quiet rivers down my cheeks, not a single visitor in 5 days, not even a phone call from Derek. Just one follow-up text from his assistant. "Mr. Holloway sends his love and will check in by phone soon." Mr. Holloway, I'd changed that boy's diapers, held his forehead through fevers, took him to speech therapy when he stuttered in second grade, stood on a folding chair at his high school graduation so I could see his face above the crowd. Now I was Mr. Holloway's mother. My hands ached to hold something, so I reached for my journal and wrote just 2 words. No more. That night, I remembered the summer when Derek was 7. He'd come home with a bloody nose after a classmate pushed him into a fence. I was icing. His face in the kitchen when he looked up and said, "I'll always be your boy, Mama. I won't forget you when I'm big." And I had believed him. I remembered the way he used to curl into my side on rainy nights, begging for one more story before bed. How he once gave me a homemade Mother of the Century coupon book that I kept in a shoebox tied with ribbon. It's still there, upstairs in my closet, and I remembered the day he got married. Kelsey wore ivory silk and a smile too tight to be sincere. During the reception, she'd said to me, "We'll make sure Derek's time is balanced between work and us and everything. Everything." That's what I had become, a logistical category. The emotional dam inside me finally broke when I overheard a nurse talking outside my room. She was young, maybe 25, and had no idea I was listening. "She's been so strong," she said. "No family visits, but she doesn't complain. I hope I'm that brave when I'm her age." Brave. They mistook silence for strength. But the truth? I wasn't strong. I was hollow. I wanted to scream. Not out of anger, but from the ache of having poured every ounce of my life into someone who now offered only crumbs in return. Had I done this to myself? Had I loved him too much? I lay there until the morning light crept through the blinds, and that's when I understood something terrible. Derek wasn't coming. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. And that was the difference I'd never dared to see. The final fracture came when I received an email from Derek's office. It was from Kelsey, actually, sent from a polished email signature. "We'd like to discuss long-term care plans for you and some options regarding your estate that may ease future transitions." It read like a corporate memo, cold, tidy, detached. No, "How are you feeling?" No, "We miss you." Just options, transitions, care plans, as if I were already gone. I closed my eyes and let a slow breath move through me. I was done trying to justify their distance. I was done pretending neglect wrapped in politeness was still love. Have you ever had to choose dignity over family? I'd love to hear your thoughts. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't write. I didn't reach for the phone. I simply stared at the ceiling and said to myself, I will not leave this world feeling discarded. I closed my eyes, not in pain, but in decision. If Derek would not show up for me, then he would not stand beside me in the end either. When they wheeled me out of the hospital, the sky was low and gray, the kind of cold that hangs in your bones. Angela, the nurse who'd cared for me the most, gave my hand a squeeze. "You're stronger than you look, Mrs. Holloway," she said with a wink. I smiled politely, but something inside me was different now, cleaner, colder, and startlingly clear. Derek didn't pick me up. Of course he didn't. I'd told him not to bother, said I was coordinating with a neighbor. He didn't argue. Just texted back, "Hope you're feeling better. We'll visit soon." The neighborhood boy, Tyler, helped me inside. 17, polite, a little awkward in his too big hoodie. He came by to shovel snow sometimes. That morning, I gave him $20 to grab a few groceries and told him I'd call if I needed more. "Want me to stay and make you some tea or something?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, sweetheart, I think I just need to be alone." The silence in the house was its own kind of medicine. No beeping monitors. No footsteps I kept mistaking for Derek's. Just my old radiators clanking like always, and the scent of lavender from the pillow spray I used to soothe my nerves. For the first time in days, I exhaled fully. Not the shallow breath of waiting, but the deep, quiet sigh of someone who's done expecting. That afternoon, I opened the hall closet and pulled out the dusty shoebox from the top shelf. Inside, everything I'd saved: Derek's drawings, the Mother of the Century coupon book, a lock of his baby hair tied with blue ribbon. I held it all in my lap and realized this was mine. These memories, this love. I didn't need to give them away anymore. I didn't need permission to feel proud. The next morning, I put on my nicest coat and walked slowly, deliberately, to the First National Bank. My cane clicked against the pavement with rhythm and resolve. The woman at the desk was young and a bit too cheerful. "How can we help you today, Ms. Holloway?" I leaned in, quietly slipping the tiny brass key across the counter. "I'd like to access my box." Inside the vault, she opened the long metal drawer and stepped back. I was alone now, just me and the contents of a life no one asked about anymore. The original deed to my home. The untouched check from the sale of my mother's land, $38,000, folded in pristine paper. A velvet pouch of jewelry I hadn't worn in years, and an envelope marked to be opened if I'm gone. I pulled out my glasses, put on my lipstick, and walked back out of that vault as if I were walking out of a courtroom with purpose. In the small conference room, my lawyer, Mr. Travers, was waiting. We'd arranged everything 2 days before from my hospital bed. He brought the forms, notarized and ready. We rewrote the will. We created a living trust. We redirected my assets, and when he slid the final document toward me and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I nodded. "I'm very sure." I wasn't cutting Derek out of my life. I was simply removing him from the parts of it he hadn't earned. That night, back home, I made myself a bowl of soup. I sat by the window and watched snow gather gently on the porch railing. I didn't feel lonely. I felt light, not because anything had changed, but because I had. As I left the bank, phone buzzing in my purse with Derek's latest missed call, I didn't flinch. I let it ring. I let it go. For once, I was the one choosing silence. 2 weeks later, Derek finally arrived. It was a Sunday, unannounced, of course. I'd just finished folding the laundry when I heard the knock. For a moment, I didn't move. I let the silence stretch long enough to consider pretending I wasn't home, but then I opened the door. He stood there in a wool coat, holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of overpriced takeout. Kelsey stood beside him, not quite smiling, eyes darting over my shoulder like she was already measuring the square footage. "Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug, light and careful, like I might crumble. "You look better." I smiled, letting the quiet do its work. "Well, I'm not dead, so there's that." They stepped inside. The house had been freshly cleaned, by me of course, and the scent of lemon oil and fireplace ash gave it warmth they couldn't touch. I offered them tea. Kelsey declined. Derek said yes, but didn't drink it. We sat in the living room, the same room where he'd unwrapped birthday gifts as a boy, the same room where he took prom pictures and swore he'd come back for Thanksgiving, every year, no matter what. And now here we were, sipping silence. "I've been meaning to come sooner," he began, fiddling with the cuff of his shirt. "Work's been chaos. You know how it is." I didn't reply. I just watched him, calmly. Kelsey jumped in. "We were so worried. Derek called the nurses every day, and I sent that flower arrangement. Remember? The peonies? I know they're your favorite." I nodded. "Yes. They were lovely. Very thoughtful." A beat passed. She leaned forward. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of. You know, now that you've had this health scare. We've been talking about some options." "Options," I repeated. "Yes," Derek said. "Like long-term care planning, maybe assisted living down the road. We can help handle the details, set things up so you don't have to worry. I've got a friend who specializes in elder estate strategy. He could—" "No." The word was soft, but it struck like a match. Derek blinked. "No?" "I'm not going anywhere," I said, folding my hands gently. "And I've already made arrangements, legal ones," Kelsey shifted. "What kind of arrangements?" I looked at her, then at Derek. "Private ones." For the first time in years, I watched Derek's polished lawyer's face falter. There was something almost childlike beneath it, something unprepared. "Mom, you don't have to make those kinds of decisions without us." I smiled. "I already did." He leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Are you sure you're thinking clearly? After the hospital? You mean after I lay there alone for a week, wondering where my only child was?" Silence. Kelsey tried to recover. "We thought space was what you needed." I stood slowly. "You were wrong. They left not long after. No hugs, just cool air and two figures disappearing into a car I didn't recognize." I stood at the window and watched the taillights vanish down the street. The next morning, Mr. Travers called. He sounded amused. "You'll be pleased to know Derek reached out. He was confused." "Confused?" I asked. "He just found out the trust excludes him as a direct beneficiary. Said he thought there must be an error." I laughed, softly, bitterly. "It's not an error." After I hung up, I went upstairs and began sorting my things, not frantically. Not like someone cleaning house in grief, but like someone preparing for peace. I gave away jewelry I no longer wore, donated half my coats. I found old letters from my sister in a shoebox, reread each one, and tied them with twine. This wasn't revenge, it wasn't spite. It was the final act of a woman deciding her ending would not be written by people who only showed up when money was on the table. I spent the rest of the week writing letters, not to Derek, not yet, but to the people who had mattered quietly all along. My neighbor who brought in my trash cans during storms, the mailman who always asked about my garden, Tyler, the boy who'd picked up my prescriptions and never asked for more than a smile. To them, I left small notes, little gifts, tokens of thanks. They came to take control. Instead, they left empty-handed. And for the first time in years, I felt like the woman I used to be, steady, quiet, and unshakably in charge. It took only 4 days after their visit for the confrontation to come. Mr. Travers called me on a Thursday afternoon while I was pruning the small rosebush near the front porch. "Margaret," he said carefully, "Derek called my office again. He's insistent. He wants to know why he wasn't informed about the trust restructure. He says he deserves an explanation." Deserves. I wiped my hands on my apron and laughed, not bitterly this time, but with a quiet kind of knowing. Tell him he knows where to find me. He did. And on Saturday morning, he came. Alone this time. He didn't knock gently. His fist hit the door with short, impatient raps, like I was a client running late. I opened it calmly. His face was tight, jaw set, eyes sharper than I'd seen in years. "Why?" he asked, before even stepping inside. I said nothing, just opened the door wider. He walked in without invitation. He turned to face me in the living room, standing near the fireplace where his father's urn used to sit. "Mom, I don't understand. I looked at the documents. You changed everything. You put the house into a trust. You removed me as executor. You set up charitable distributions. You even—" "I did what was right," I said simply. He blinked. "Right? For who?" "For me," I said. He paced a little, the way he used to when frustrated as a teenager. "I'm your son. I've always been here for you." I tilted my head. "Have you?" A beat passed. He looked away. "You know how hard I've worked. Kelsey and I have obligations. We've got the firm, the apartment, her father's health. I was in a hospital bed for 7 days, Derek." He stopped pacing. Continued, voice level. "I had nurses holding my hand, not my son. I had strangers cleaning my wounds. I had flowers delivered with no face behind them. If I'd died, you wouldn't have even known until a clerk called." His eyes glistened, but his pride held. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He sat down heavily in the chair across from me, the same one he used to drape his school backpack over. He looked smaller now, not physically, but spiritually. The self-assurance had cracked. "I don't understand how we got here," he said. I nodded. "Neither do I. But here we are." There was a long silence. Then softly, I said, "When your father died, I didn't sleep for 6 weeks. But I got up, every day, for you. I packed your lunches while wiping my tears on paper towels. I never let you see me fall apart. I was your anchor." His mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. "I gave you everything, Derek, and I expected nothing. But what I realize now is, love that never gets replenished turns into emptiness, and I won't die empty." We sat in that silence together. He didn't apologize, and I didn't ask for one. Instead, I stood and walked into the hallway. I returned with a thick envelope and handed it to him. "This is the letter you'll receive from Mr. Travers when the time comes. But I'd rather you read it now. It explains everything." He looked down at it, then up at me. "What do you want from me?" I smiled, gently, not unkindly. "Nothing. That's the point." He left without another word. That night, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and watched the streetlights flicker on. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt still, steady. In the days that followed, I began putting things in place. I met with the director of a local girls' scholarship fund and made a contribution in my mother's name. I arranged for my house to pass to the local historical society after I was gone, and I kept writing letters. One by one. Each envelope I sealed felt like a chapter closing. Not out of sorrow, out of peace. As I sealed my final envelope and pressed the stamp into place, I whispered to no one, "Now it's your turn to wonder what you meant to me." It's been 5 months since that conversation with Derek. Winter has given way to early spring, and the days feel softer now. The air carries that first blush of earth, muddy, green, alive. I walk every morning, just half a block, cane in hand, breath steady. The rosebush I planted near the porch is beginning to bud, tiny red promises curled tight against the chill. Derek hasn't visited again. He's called a handful of times, short conversations, his voice clipped, as if he's trying to meet some moral obligation. "How are you feeling? You need anything?" Kelsey says hi. I keep it polite, brief. I thank him. Then I hang up. He doesn't ask real questions. He doesn't ask why, and I don't offer answers anymore. The truth is, I've stopped hoping for understanding. Some lessons a person has to learn without you holding their hand. I held his hand for so long, I forgot what mine felt like when it was empty. Now, I like the space. I spend time at the local library, reading to a group of third-grade girls on Wednesdays. They call me Miss M and give me crayon portraits that don't look a thing like me. I frame them anyway. I've started cooking again, slow meals like I used to. Chicken and dumplings, cornbread, stewed apples. I don't cook for anyone but myself now, and still, I light the good candles, because I deserve the table set even if I'm the only one sitting at it. Mr. Travers stopped by recently to finalize some paperwork. He looked at me across my kitchen table, the very one Derek once did his homework on. "You know," he said, "I've never seen someone handle things so cleanly, so calmly." I smiled. It's amazing what you can do when you stop trying to be understood. The trust is secure. The scholarship fund has already received its first installment. My house will become a historical site, complete with all the original furniture and photographs I've carefully labeled and preserved. There's no drama now, no chaos. Just choices, quiet and final. A few weeks ago, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and saw Tyler, the boy who helped me during my recovery, walking his dog. I waved him over and handed him a letter. "What's this?" he asked. "A thank you." "For being decent?" He smiled, a little embarrassed. "It was nothing." "It was everything," I said. "Small kindnesses are often more valuable than grand gestures. That's something you only learn after everything else falls away." The day I wrote the last letter to Derek, I didn't plan to, but something in me needed to close the loop. I sat at my desk, pulled out my fountain pen, and started slowly. "Dear Derek, I want you to know I loved you. I still do. But love that isn't seen, isn't felt, begins to lose its shape. I stopped recognizing myself in the reflection of your care. There was a time when I would have handed you everything I had, just to see you happy. I have since learned that happiness, like love, cannot be bought or earned. It must be shared. When you are older, I hope you look back not in anger, but in understanding. I did not disown you. I simply reclaimed myself. This house, these savings, my life, they were never rewards for loyalty. They were meant to be gifts, not obligations. And like all true gifts, once I saw they were no longer received with gratitude, I chose to give them elsewhere. I hope you find peace. I have. Mom, I sealed the letter, addressed it, and walked it down to the mailbox myself. No return address, just the truth. If you could write one letter to someone who hurt you, what would it say? I didn't write to be forgiven. I wrote to be finished. The funny thing about peace is that it's not loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or bright epiphanies. It seeps in, quiet as dust in morning light, soft as the sigh of an empty house finally at rest. Most of my life, I believed that being a good mother meant giving endlessly, that if I just loved hard enough, sacrificed enough, forgave enough, the love would always return to me. But the truth is, even the purest kind of love can lose its shape when it's poured into someone who never cups their hands to catch it. I don't hate Derek. That's not the ending I want. Hate takes energy, and I've learned to save mine for better things. Fresh tomatoes on toast, a sun-warmed porch swing, the giddy sound of children mispronouncing big words during library story time. Derek exists in my life now like a photograph in a dusty frame, familiar, but no longer active. A piece of the past, not the architect of my future. And I'm okay with that. Letting go doesn't always mean cutting off. Sometimes it just means loosening your grip, slowly, until you're no longer holding what's been hurting you. I walk, more now. Not far, but enough to feel the wind against my cheeks and remind myself that I'm still here, still alive. There's a quiet kind of joy in learning to belong to yourself again. The garden is blooming in fits and starts. The rose bush I planted during recovery has opened its first blossom, deep red, edges crisp with morning dew. I stand over it sometimes, tea in hand, and think about all the things I survived without ever being thanked. And I no longer feel the need for that, thank you. Some debts can never be repaid. Some wounds will never be acknowledged. And yet, we heal anyway. When I was younger, I used to think legacy meant money, land, names etched into headstones. Now, I think legacy is something simpler. Legacy is the way the neighbor's daughter waved at me yesterday, holding the book I recommended. Legacy is the $20 bill I slid into Tyler's pocket with the words, "You've got good in you, don't forget that." Legacy is the crayon drawings still taped to my fridge. Derek may one day look back and wonder why I made the choices I did. He might tell himself stories. He might twist the truth to soothe his own guilt. That's his right. But I'll be gone by then, and I'm not afraid of being misunderstood anymore because I lived my life honestly. I gave when I could. I stopped when I had to. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. If anyone asks how I spent the last years of my life, tell them this. I went to the hospital expecting my son. I came home expecting myself. And I found her again. I went to the hospital alone. But I walked out with something far more powerful than company. Myself.